before I get into the office, I will have that war settled. 100% sure.
Donald Trump promised he could end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. On Friday, he finally had his chance, sitting face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Alaska for nearly 3 hours. When it was over, there was no ceasefire, no deal, no peace. Just two leaders calling the talks productive and constructive. For America, the stakes are enormous. Billions in taxpayer dollars, NATO's credibility, and the question of whether Washington is still leading the world or giving ground to Moscow. This was not just another diplomatic handshake. It was the first U.S.-Russia summit since Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II. The location itself carried symbolism. A U.S. Air Force base in Alaska, America's northern frontier, closer to Russia than to Washington, chosen to project both strength and neutrality. Cameras captured the two leaders walking a red carpet as military jets flew overhead, an echo of the tense Cold War summits where the fate of nations once hung in the balance. For Trump, this was the test of a campaign promise. Could he use his skills as a negotiator to achieve what no Western leader has managed, a breakthrough with Putin? For Putin, it was already a victory. After years of isolation, sanctions, and an international arrest warrant, he was once again standing shoulder to shoulder with the American president. Trump entered office promising to end the war in one day. But leaving Alaska, his message was far less decisive. He told reporters, "There's no deal until there's a deal." Speaking later to Fox News' Sean Hannity, Trump claimed progress had been made on land swaps and security guarantees. He even said, "I think we're pretty close to a deal." But when asked for specifics, he offered none. Unlike past Cold War summits that ended with signed agreements, like Reagan and Gorbachev's arms control framework in Reykjavik, Alaska produced only ambiguity. Trump's words were carefully chosen, almost vague. He declined to take shouted questions from reporters. For an audience expecting bold breakthroughs, the reality was anticlimactic. Trump left with talking points, not a treaty. For Putin, the optics were enough. Here was a leader wanted by the International Criminal Court, accused of forcibly deporting Ukrainian children, treated instead with the respect of a global statesman. When he spoke, his message was clear. Russia would not stop fighting until what he called the root causes of the conflict were resolved. In Moscow's view, that means rolling back NATO's presence and blocking Ukraine's path to the West. In other words, the Alaska talks did not shift Putin's core demands. He remains resistant to a ceasefire. He still believes time is on his side, that he can outlast Ukraine and its allies. And with every appearance beside Trump, he gains legitimacy, even as missiles fall on Ukrainian cities. But perhaps the most telling detail was who wasn't there. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Kyiv had no seat at the table. Zelensky had said before the meeting that any path to peace must include Ukraine. Instead, Trump and Putin talked about his country's future without him. Trump later said he would call Zelensky to update him, but his words hinted at pressure. Ukraine has to make a deal. Look, Russia is a very big power, and they're not. For Americans watching, this raises hard questions. Billions of taxpayer dollars have already gone to support Ukraine's defense. If Washington starts pushing Kyiv toward concessions, essentially freezing the war and allowing Russia to hold on to 1/5 of Ukraine, was that money spent to secure freedom or just to buy time? For Zelensky, who has ruled out surrendering territory, Alaska may have been a warning. America's priorities could shift, and Ukraine might be left to live with the consequences. The Alaska summit also had ripple effects beyond Ukraine. Hours after meeting Putin, Trump announced he would delay tariffs on China for purchasing Russian oil. Just days earlier, he had threatened new penalties. Now, he told Hannity, "Because of what happened today, I don't have to think about that right now." The message was clear. Decisions on China were being shaped, at least in part, by Trump's talks with Moscow. For Beijing, it was a welcome pause. For India, already facing a 50% tariff on its U.S. imports, including a 25% penalty linked to Russian crude, the contrast was stark. By giving China breathing room while punishing India, Trump blurred the line between wartime diplomacy and economic bargaining. For American viewers, it raised a simple question. Were Alaska's outcomes about securing peace or about cutting deals? As the meeting ended, Putin smiled and said in English, "Next time in Moscow." Trump laughed, admitting he might get a little heat on that one, but did not rule it out. Think about what that means. An American president visiting Moscow while the war in Ukraine still rages, while Putin is under indictment for war crimes. For NATO allies, it would be a jarring symbol. For Putin, it would be the ultimate prize, proof that despite sanctions and condemnation, he remains indispensable. The Alaska summit gave him a photo op. A Moscow summit would give him validation. While leaders talked in Alaska, air raid sirens wailed in Ukraine. Overnight, Russia launched 85 drones, with Ukraine claiming to have shot down 61. Moscow reported intercepting 29 Ukrainian drones over its own territory. In the Sumy, Donetsk, Chernihiv, and Dnipropetrovsk regions, residents once again spent the night in shelters. The contradiction was stark. Inside a quiet conference room, Trump and Putin spoke of progress. Outside, Europe's bloodiest war in generations continued without pause. For Americans, the Alaska summit leaves three critical questions. First, what happens to U.S. credibility? NATO allies are already nervous that Washington may cut a deal that leaves Ukraine weakened. If America pressures its partner into concessions, how reliable will U.S. security guarantees appear elsewhere? Second, what about cost? Congress has already approved tens of billions for Ukraine's defense. If peace talks stall or freeze the conflict, taxpayers could find themselves funding an endless stalemate with no clear endgame. And third, what about security at home? Energy markets remain unstable. Oil prices rise with every escalation. Inflation at the pump and in grocery stores is tied directly to the outcome of this war. If America loses influence over negotiations, ordinary families could feel it in their wallets. So, who really won in Alaska? Trump walked away with talking points but no treaty. Putin walked away with legitimacy, a handshake on U.S. soil and the prospect of a Moscow summit. Ukraine walked away excluded, its fate discussed without its voice. And America walked away facing the same war, the same costs, and the same risks as before. The Alaska summit ended not with peace, but with proof of how far a deal still is. No ceasefire, no concessions, no breakthrough. Just another reminder that this conflict, and America's stake in it, is far from over. Do you think Trump can actually deliver peace with Putin, or did Alaska just give Moscow more time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to The Briefing for clear, fact-checked coverage of stories that shape America's future.